1 o'clock on the dot. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, those who joined us this afternoon for the webinar. That's one of our COMET webinar series for 2025. This is the third one this year, I think. There's still a few coming up, as you can see on the screen. We're going to be talking in the next webinars about effective report writing, benefits of site-based reporting, impact of diversity and inclusion on developing safety culture, and also root cause analysis throughout the year. So please watch out for announcements on our website, on our social media. Please join if you can. Today, let me introduce myself. My name is Natalia. I am Learning and Development Delivery Lead at COMET. I'll be talking today about data-driven decision-making for human beings, I suppose. My role within COMET is to support learning and development delivery in terms of all things human, management development, leadership development, safety culture from the human perspective. So this particular webinar today has been inspired by one of other topics that COMET looks into, as in data-driven decision-making and all things data. My take on it is about humans and human impact on data-driven decision-making. It's not as simple as it sounds. We are all full of flaws. We are all full of bias and mistakes. So today I'm going to be talking about how does it all impact our data-driven decision-making, how does it all impact our data gathering in general, and our approach to data. It's a couple of minutes past, so I hope everyone is here so far. Please, please make yourself comfortable. Grab that cup of tea or coffee. This webinar is designed to last for about an hour, but we'll probably be done a bit sooner than that. Any questions? If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will answer them afterwards. And also, this webinar is going to be recorded and made available for you for future reference. Okay, sun is shining. Let's move on. The art of data-driven decision-making simplified. My first title was for mere mortals, for human beings. So please do not be put off by the title data-driven decision-making, thinking that this is only for data scientists or for data analysts. No, this is for all of us mere mortals, especially people who deal with data, who need to use data in the day-to-day decision-making, but they are not that into technicalities of it. So what we're going to be doing today, what we're going to be talking about, is defining data-driven decision-making. We'll be talking about challenges and considerations of the process of data-driven decision-making. We will also talk about non-technical skills required for effective decision-making in general, specifically around data. And again, it's not aimed at technical minds. It's aimed at people who have dealings with data day to day without getting too technical. I hope that sounds interesting. Let's move on. Defining data and information. What is data and information? Data. Data is simply a set of facts and figures obtained through observation, measurements, analysis, research that can be interpreted and used. Data can be quantitative, can be qualitative. So in general, data is just facts and figures, okay, but doesn't yet mean anything as such. What is information then? Information is data that has been processed, organized, structured, analyzed, and interpreted into a conclusion. Okay, so let me give you an example. We're looking at the weather forecast. It tells us that it's 15 degrees outside. Okay, that's a data. But that data doesn't exist in void. Okay, that data exists in certain context. Okay, so we then analyze and process that data. Okay, it's 15 degrees. Doesn't mean it's cold. Doesn't mean it's hot. Doesn't mean it's a nice weather. What else affects that particular temperature? Okay, is it windy? Is it not windy? So data, our data is 15 degrees. Our information is what we get out of it, how we interpret it. So let us look at some examples of data in business context. Our data is things like employees tenure and number of leavers in a year, annual revenue figures, a number of product support tickets, for instance, social media metrics, number of complaints, project budget, test score, sensor readings, and more qualitative data such as customer preference survey, feedback about a service. Okay? All of that is just sets of facts and figures, don't yet have any meanings as such. So when does it become information? When we give it a context and a meaning. Okay, so our employees tenure and number of leavers tell us about retention and turnover in our company. Has it changed over time? How is it in comparison to the previous year? Same goes for annual revenue figures. Okay, only if analyzed in the context of previous years, in the context of comparing with our competition, for instance. Okay, that gives us information about financial health of the company. Number of product support tickets, again, in itself, it's just a number. Okay, but did it go up or down in comparison to the previous year, month, week? So how effective is the product? Number of complaints, how satisfied our customers or dissatisfied in that example. Social media metrics, okay, again, in itself, that's just numbers and graphs, but it tells us about popularity and brand recognition, again, in a certain context. Test score, okay, gives us information about our grade and position on a scale. Are we average? Are we top 10? Are we bottom 10? Sensor readings, okay, it tells us about performance of the equipment, again, read in a certain context. Customer preference survey, okay, that gives us information about market trends and niches. Feedback about service, that tells us about quality of the offering, again, read in certain context. So, on this note, what is data-driven decision-making then? What is a decision-making? Okay, decision-making is a process of choosing between different options or courses of action, involving gathering information, evaluating alternatives, and ultimately selecting the best path forward. Okay, simple as that. However, okay, do we always make our decisions based on data? Are we always objective in our decision making? How often do we use intuition? How often do we use, I don't know, flip of a coin even? So what's different about data-driven decision making? What's different is that this approach emphasizes using data and analysis instead of intuition or any other non-objective ways of making a decision to inform our decision making. It involves using the relevant data sources to guide the decision making process. Okay, so we don't rely on flip of a coin, but we are actually reading through our data, making conclusions and interpretation of it to then choose the best course of action. Okay, that sounds very simple. So how do we get from A to B? We have data that we gather, that we access. We have information that we process, structure, analyze, interpret. And then we make a decision, the best course of action, informed by the data and information. Okay? Sounds very simple, and it should be. However, is it that simple? The answer is no, it's not that simple, okay? When it gets to decisions. Let's have a look on this example. That's a random dashboard. It's totally unrelated to any existing organization, but it's a common example of a dashboard that could be found in companies. Okay, so we have this particular dashboard is about operational effectiveness. We have sets of data here presented in various ways. We have graphs, we have figures, we have numbers, we have all sorts of things. So Theoretically, that should be enough to make a decision. Is it that simple? We have all that data, okay, as in the previous slide. But what is it that we need to know? What is it? What is our question? What is it that we need to find out? What is it that we want to make a decision on? Okay. The next thing about data is its quality. Is that data relevant? Is that data credible, complete, accurate? How much confidence do we have in that data, in that dashboard that we've just seen? How is that information delivered to us? How is it accessed? How is it presented? Is that easy to read? Is that rather difficult? And the last bit is about information gains. What is that data and information telling us? We probably come with certain preconception about what is it that we want to know, and we probably already try to guess an answer. Okay, but information gain may come as a surprise. This is the model that's been developed within COMET that is used when we support clients in terms of their data assessments. This model is very useful in terms of the input and output. I would highly recommend reading a little bit more about it. So let's look at an example. Okay, how does it all connect? I picked up a challenge of looking at staff training, okay, in organization. And our task here is to define what training to prioritize in the next budgeting year. That's a decision to be made based on data. So what we see here in front of us is a simple dashboard that is, again, often used by human resources department, okay? It's employee training dashboard, tells us about the cost per participant, about our budget, about number of training courses completed, number of hours of training, and so on. But does it actually give us more meaningful information? It's pretty much quantitative in general. So how do we then extract information from it? How do we then find out more about what to prioritize? What to be aware of each step of the way when trying to make our decision what to prioritize for next year. Let's start from the right questions that will give us the right answers. Okay, so that's what we mentioned about the information needs. What is it that we want to know? What is it that we need to know? What is the right question to ask to find that out? So let's start with definition of your information needs. We need to define the purpose of our data gathering. What is it that I want to know and why is that? Okay, what is the purpose of it? What is the scope of my information of data and information that I need to gather? What specifics about the matter do I need to find out? What are my scope and boundaries? Is it only in relation to a certain region? Is it only in relation to a certain time scale? Is it only the UK data over the last year, or is it a global data over the last 5 years? What are my scope and boundaries? Last but not least, define other potentially impacting or impacted factors. Okay, what else do I need to know to make that decision? Okay, so what are my secondary questions, if you like? What else is going to be impacted? So in this example, okay, we are trying to ask a question: what training is the most desirable to invest in? But that depending on the company strategy, current market conditions and trends, our budgets and accessibility of training, what's the existing skill set in our company, what budget is available through internal budgeting mechanisms, is there any external funding available for us, what is the influence of various factors like public policies, like demographics, like clients, and what else is going to be impacted. So each question, okay, especially from the top, each question is a question in itself, okay? Each question is a decision in itself, if you like. So to be able to prioritize, to be able to ask the right question, we need to actually probably work our way down from the widest one to, okay, what is it that we want to focus on? Okay, what is our existing skill set? That will then inform our next steps. Or what is our company strategy? XYZ, okay, that will inform our next steps, and so on and so on. So what are the challenges here in that first step of the question? The question could be unclear, too wide, too narrow, too vague. Insufficient consideration given to potential stakeholders who may hold an important data or insight. Insufficient consideration to any other impacting or impacted factors. If we don't take into consideration anything else that could even be remotely impacted, that may actually backfire further down the line. So be aware of it. Our next step is looking at the data itself. Okay, so devil is in the details. We have our data. Okay, so we now need to assess the quality of our data. Is that data credible? Do we have a confidence in it? Is it consistent and complete? How is it captured? How is it accessed? Is it really difficult to dig for data, or is it presented to us in a way that is actually accessible? Is it meaningful to us? Okay, is it meaningful to our decision? Is it meaningful to our question? Is it valuable for us, for our purpose here? Okay, is that data useful to us? And what is the culture around data? That's a factor that is often overlooked, especially in large organizations or organizations that have recently merged, which is happening especially across the North Sea of Scotland. You may find that a culture of one organization is different to another, obviously. Okay, and that goes down to how they hold the data, how they operate the data, and how they protect the data. Some organizations are quite transparent, quite consistent with their data management. Some others may be quite fragmented. Some others may be quite protective. You may find a culture of being siloed. You may find a culture that is open. That is also quite a consideration I would encourage you to think about. How about data generated by artificial intelligence? Okay, that's a very timely topic. Artificial intelligence is increasingly used for a variety of tasks within organizations, for a variety of tasks outside. It's now part of our lives. But the same principles apply. Okay, what is the credibility of the original source? How the AI obtained the data? That's especially relevant when we use things like ChatGPT, okay, and it gives us all sorts of answers. Well, is that people's opinion? Is it based on any specific source? What is the credibility of that original source? How complete and accurate is the data generated by AI? Does it use consistent methodologies and algorithms? How is it actually programmed? I ran a bit of a research, if you like, for my own purposes, asking people, do you know who creates algorithms for AI used in your organizations? Well, people have very little knowledge about it, and people have very little appreciation to those algorithms that are written effectively by humans somewhere to begin with. And so I'd encourage to also perhaps think about, okay, how is my AI tool, how is it designed, how does it work? To then make sure that you can trace it back, you can trace the answer back to the source. What is the culture around AI? Is that do we run some objective checks, or do we over-rely on data generated by AI? I would also consider error margin. Since data is produced by humans or processed by humans, or there is a human intervention in data to an extent, it's prone to errors. Okay, example being when we have a financial spreadsheet, for instance. Okay, we have thousands of rows, but in 2 of them there's a typo. Okay, so that distorts the end result. But how much of it is it a problem? Is that a typo is that a typo only around pennies, or is it a typo around millions? that may distort the entire budget. So I would be objective. I would encourage you to be objective around your data and consider that error margin. Find out if there is an error margin in it, historically perhaps. Be aware of it. So again, going back to our example of staff training prioritization, what data do we need for it? Okay, we are going to need all sorts of data to be able to make a decision. That goes well beyond the original dashboard that we looked at. So we're looking at financial statements, we're looking at performance appraisals, we're looking at corporate strategy documents, staff training and competence records, we're looking at market analysis, staff and management surveys, things like 360 surveys perhaps, public statistics, any stakeholders consultations. That's a lot of data, okay? So don't be afraid. It's not as scary as it looks. And that data could be presented to us in all forms and sizes. We could have external data, things like skills trends analysis, public sector gender pay reporting, skills trends charts, profit and loss, okay, that then will inform our budget, employee training KPIs, skills gap analysis, and all sorts of, okay? So we already see that each of these examples has probably been created using different methodologies around data. How do we then marry this up for us to be able to make a consistent decision? Okay, that's probably the case of an exercise of trying it, of creating yet another sort of tool for ourselves to convert all of this into one sort of format. Okay, what are the challenges here? Again, data could be incomplete, could contain errors, inaccuracies. We have multiple sources. Okay, so how do we know what were the methodologies for these sources? How credible is the origin? What is the depth of that data? What level of detail does it contain? Is it too broad or is it too narrow? Is it consistent? Is it useful to me? How easy for me is it to capture and access the data? Do I have to dig around and make formal requests, or is that the case of just accessing it? Again, what is the culture around data in your organization? Siloed, protective, or transparent and shared? Again, what is uncertainty and error margin here? And another thing that I'm going to be talking about in a little while is biased approach. Okay, only selecting data sets that using only a selection of data sets. Okay, often the most accessible to us. But is that going to give us full picture? Selected data set may give us distorted results. Okay, let me just grab a sip of water. Another thing, okay, information delivery. And I choose a statement that was originally said by Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras was a predecessor of the ancient Greek philosophers. Okay, so he was the first one of the famous Greek philosophers. He was a predecessor of Aristotle and others. Appearances are a glimpse of the unseen. Okay, what that means? That means that in our context here, that means that data, in general, it's a totally different. It's a totally different world, if you like. Okay, so there is a universe of data, but we are only able to process a certain portion of it. Okay, so we need appearances, we need the right gateways to our data to then be able to glimpse into the unseen, to uncover the unseen. So the appearances, okay, if our appearance, if our gateway is too difficult to open, if our gateway is too wide, perhaps, okay, is it going to give us the right window into our data? So I'm talking about the data information delivery as such. Okay, evaluate how is your data delivered and how easy it is to use for decision making. It's all very well to gather the data, but how do we then use it, present it? How do we then see it to then make it to then make a decision on it? So what do we think about in terms of information delivery? What are our best practices? Is that accessible? Okay, if we think about a dashboard, if we think about our reporting tools, reporting programs, software, and so on, is that accessible? Is that easy to have in front of you? Is it usable? Usable meaning, do you need to have specialist skills and be IT guru to be able to operate that particular piece of software, or is that easy to use for end users? Is it configurable? Can I use various filters to be able to zoom into data, for instance, from last year or from last month and so on? Is it clear? Or is it clunky and crowded and it doesn't really, and I'm totally lost in it? Is it current? Okay, or is it outdated? Is it maintained? Okay, or was it just a case of uploading information into the dashboard some time ago and no one ever looked into this again? Is it embedded? Okay, that means that if all of the rest is that a normal route for decision makers in our organization to actually go to information delivery tools to make a decision, or is it a new thing in our organization in terms of our culture? Okay. So again, I am showing the same slide as before, and when we look at information delivery in these examples, how easy it is for us to use this data. Okay, it's probably again the case that each and every single one was presented in different ways. Some of that is probably a report, some of that is a dashboard, some other ones are templates and simple profit and loss comparison. I guess it sometimes depends on our personal preference. What do we prefer? How do we prefer the data to be presented to us? So I would probably encourage to find your own way. How do you like it? And then find a way to convert, for instance, a training API dashboard, which could be a bit clunky, into a meaningful information by color coding, for instance, by grouping the information together and so on. What are the challenges here? Again, information display tools could not be accessible, okay? Maybe they exist somewhere in our internal systems, but no one really knows where. Do they require advanced technical skills? Okay, information display could be fragmented, spread across multiple channels of delivery. Okay, so you want to know X, Y, Z, but actually that chunk of information related to that is on this system. Another chunk is on a spreadsheet. Another chunk is on Power BI dashboard. So is that actually easy for you to manage? Information display could be complex and cumbersome. Again, is it time consuming to decipher? Data sets could not be maintained or information not up to date. Another common mistake, if you like, is no clear purpose of reporting. Not clear what is it used for, and therefore how it should be structured. Okay, that's a common thing. Reporting for the sake of reporting rather than actually meaningful reporting, therefore limited number of data. Insufficient consideration to end user information needs, reporting overload, information lost in unnecessary data noise. Okay, and it's often a mistake made by people who present the information. We could find sometimes information presented to us is far more than we actually need. Okay, because that person did not consider what is it that we want to know or we need to know. They present to us everything that there is to know about that subject. Is that really necessary? I would also encourage you to think about manipulation of information, show hide for personal gains. Obviously, that's malicious, okay, but it does happen. Certain data perhaps hidden being hidden to cover up for certain mistakes, or certain other data emphasized to emphasize someone's success and so on. I would also encourage you to think about such things. Okay, so the last bit is about information gains? What is it that we are actually getting from all of that data? What is the data telling us? Are we discovering some additional aspects or factors that also need to be investigated? Okay, we started thinking about staff training, but now we need to think about demographics, perhaps. We now need to think about the cost of logistics. Okay, we now need to perhaps investigate the market in terms of training provision, in terms of providers of training and providers of training management services, perhaps. Okay, so now it grows. It doesn't grow arms and legs, but it grows into a certain other aspect that is also relevant. Do you recognize a level of uncertainty in your data? Okay, have you checked for any errors? Have you checked for any error margins in the data that you have? Okay, so challenges here are that we could derive wrong conclusions from incorrect data or poorly designed question. If our question to begin with was not clear or was vague or was too wide, well, we are probably not going to get the right answer yet. Subjective interpretation of data. Okay, so again, data is just sets of facts and figures. Information is how that data is interpreted. How about if it's subjective? How about if it's not, if it's out of context? How about if it's selective or biased? Okay, another thing is, do we over rely on data? Okay, again, if we do not consider uncertainty, errors, probabilities of risks, it's only black and white. This is what data is telling us. However, okay, now we know that data could contain errors. So are we 100% sure here? I would also encourage to think about uncertainty and perhaps try to measure it or include in our data and in our decision making as well. So, how do we overcome these challenges? How do we master our skills and our approach to data-driven decision making to overcome it? So, I was thinking about a statement that I called cautious curiosity mindset. Okay, so again, we are not talking about technical skills, about data mining or about data analytics or about data science. We're talking about a mindset that all of us can develop to become cautiously curious. Yes, to develop that cautious curiosity. Okay. So I would say the first thing is to become more precise and clear in defining our scope and our question. Okay, remove ambiguity. Stakeholders, communicate clearly. Ask them, what are your concerns here? Negotiate with them. Okay. Our stakeholders in the example of staff training are well, our employees, obviously. Okay, but also senior leadership. Could be our clients, could also be our contractors, perhaps. Okay, so if we impose a certain training as mandatory from now on, does it mean that we then take cost of it for contractors, or do we then impose that on contractors? So we need to you need to listen to their concerns. We need to, find a win-win with them. How do we make that work? System thinking, again, give due consideration to all factors. Zoom out. Yes, we are looking at staff training and what to prioritize, but there are various other factors to consider. Okay, how is our market going? How is our business development going? How is our wider population around our business? What's the state of it? What are the trends here? Okay, what is the legislation that is coming up? How does that then? How will it then going to affect our bottom line? Example of that being latest legislation increasing national insurance contributions. Okay, obviously that then perhaps if our staff training depends on payroll, so that's a payroll contribution mechanism. Does it then shrink our business case for bigger budget for training? How does it then relate? Another thing, be realistic and critical about your data. Okay, find out where does it come from. What's the reliability of that source? What's the reliability of that source? What's the currency of that data? Can I trace it back to the source? Can I verify it? And also, what is the uncertainty and errors in that data? What is the sort of historical statistics around it, perhaps? When we get public data, public statistics, there is always that statement about the error margin is 3%, 5%, and so on. I would encourage you to think about your data internally in the same way. What is that error margin in it too? Quality over quantity in your information delivery. Okay, again, what I mentioned about prioritizing what your audience wants or needs to know. Reporting is not yet analysis. Reporting is not yet helpful to decision making. Is reporting on things that are relevant is what decision making is about. Keep an open mind. Gained insight may come as a surprise. Okay, you may be inclined to think about. You may already have an answer formed in your head, but actually data shows you something totally different. So keep an open mind to it too. Okay, the last thing, I'm not sure if that's actually visible over the video of myself, but be aware of personal agendas and bias. Okay, it's all very well looking at the data and so on. However, humans are only humans. They may have some personal agendas here. They may be driven by bias, which we're going to look at in a moment. So watch out for bias traps. We know bias is probably a shortcut that shortcuts that our brains take when evaluating information that is presented to us. Okay, so in itself is not yet perhaps a problem. Okay, it becomes a problem if it distorts and clouds our judgment. So one of the bias, for instance, could be confirmation bias. Okay, in terms of the data-driven decision making. So again, we have a preconceived answer perhaps in our head, preconceived direction or our preferred direction we want to go. Okay, so we start from our initial question through selective data and information analysis to a conclusion that are all angled towards the preferred outcome. But we don't want to hear information that is contradicting what we're thinking. Okay, the flip side of it is the loss or risk aversion bias. Okay, so fear of losing or risk is bigger than considerations of potential gains. So that's emphasis on data against the point. Okay, so we have confirmation bias. Okay, so sort of pushing towards our preferred outcome, and then we have aversion bias. Okay, so pushing away from the outcome that we want to avoid. Another example of bias in decision making is halo effect. Okay, so positive impression or conclusion in one area may influence perception of other aspects. So if one set of data, perhaps in information, is telling us to go for that, we may actually underestimate then risk. Okay, so that halo effect sort of spreads over other sets of data. Oh, no, it's not going to be too bad. Okay, well, we have that one data that is telling us is going to be okay, but actually we are not being objective in evaluating risk here. Okay, another one, and that's very common. Again, we were talking about how information is presented to us, how is it delivered to us. If our systems are too cumbersome, if our systems are too fragmented, if it's too difficult to access data, our bias could be based on just making decisions based on available information rather than actually diligently seeking all relevant information, regardless of the effort it takes, as much as possible, obviously. So we only rely on information that is presented on a dashboard that we prefer, okay? But actually there are other sets of data that we should probably look at, but we don't because, well, that's too time consuming or too hard. I don't know where to look for it, but we don't make an effort to find out. Another one, a common one, is anchoring bias. Okay, so tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information encountered when making decision. even if that's not the most accurate or relevant. Okay, so someone tells us that such and such training, for instance, is fantastic. Okay, such and such provider of training is fantastic. You should go for it. Okay, so we are now anchored towards thinking about that. Okay, data presented to us tells us otherwise. No, this is not the best way for us. Okay, or this provider is not the best for us. But my pal recommended. Okay, that they are fantastic. They are great. So we are now anchored towards that preference. Okay, another example being framing. Okay, so being influenced by how information is presented rather than the actual content. So that relates to, again, our dashboards, again, our systems that we hold. We prefer, obviously, clarity. We prefer transparency of information. So if that information is presented to us in a way that we prefer, we tend to sort of overestimate the importance of that information over information that is actually more relevant, but perhaps is less accessible, perhaps was not presented to us in such an easy way. So we are framed by that, what's being presented to us. Okay, last but not least, it could be overconfidence bias. Okay, so we have a tendency to overestimate someone's abilities or the accuracy of one's judgment. Okay, over relying on data without critical consideration of errors. So we are presented with data by someone perhaps who holds a huge respect. Okay, so we tend to believe him. Okay, which is fair enough. But actually, should we perhaps apply a little bit of objectivity here, a little bit of critical thinking, and perhaps double check ourselves? Is that actually all true? Is that actually all correct, all right? We're all human beings, even the most, the highest respected specialists. They can also make mistakes and errors. So we should probably apply some sort of criticality here as well. Okay. So again, going back to our example of staff training prioritization, how our decision can be distorted by all of this, what I just been talking about. Okay, so if our our financial data is somehow inaccurate, perhaps, okay, we could make wrong estimates of the training budget, underinvest or overspend. Okay. If we use the wrong data around skills gaps, perhaps, or ignore it in general, okay, that can lead to our skills saturation. We have now too many specialists in a certain field that we don't need, or we do not invest in skills that we actually need. So we have now skill shortage. We could wrongly evaluate market trends. Okay, so we now try to invest in skills or skills in product or service, or invest in a knowledge that is not actually in demand. So it's not going to be beneficial to us in terms of creating our competitive advantage. Okay, we perhaps failed to consider demographic trends. Okay, so saturation or shortage of workforce. Do we have a surplus of skilled workforce in the area already? So do we actually need to invest? Can we just invest in recruitment of these people and retention? Or is there a shortage of workforce in our region? So we should probably start thinking about attracting more workforce alongside investment in skills. Okay, and that's an interesting one. Underestimated impact on salaries expectations after upskilling, influencing retention afterwards. Okay, that's again a common mistake. When an organization invests specifically in highly specialized skills, it sometimes fails to recognize that after being trained and getting some experience, these people will now expect more. So we cannot keep them on the same salary. Okay. If they do not get paid as according to their skills and experience now, they may start leaving. Okay, so your investment in skills is actually investing in skills to benefit someone else. Okay, so your skilled people are now started leaving because you did not think enough about impact on salaries. You did not factor that in your forecast. Okay, again, bias towards a preferred training provider, perhaps. Okay, our PAL told us that such and such center is fantastic, so we are now biased towards them, but they are perhaps not the best solution for us. Okay, if we fail to look into things like annual appraisals, okay, and what are our employees are actually telling us, what are their aspirations and development goals, then we may end up with disengagement. Okay, we may think that, okay, we're going to invest in certain pool of skills, but actually our employees, not that many of them is interested in it. They want to do something else. So how do we then marry that up? How do we then make sure that they stay engaged? Okay, you'll be glad to know that this is we're getting to the end. So my last sort of call to action to all of you who are listening to me this afternoon is, what are you going to do today to make sure that your decision making is truly data driven? So I would encourage you to think about an area, a skill, perhaps an angle, okay, of what we were talking about this afternoon that you feel you could improve, perhaps, or you feel that there is some work to be done around that decision making, perhaps in my sphere of influence within my team, as me as a leader, perhaps. So I would encourage you to be critical and objective to yourselves too, and then create that mindset, that cautious curiosity mindset, being cautious around what is it that you're looking at, and being curious around, okay, so how did that data originate? Where is it? Where does it originate from? How credible is that? Who is that person who wrote that piece of report, for instance? And so on and so on. So I would encourage you to think about it today. For more information and for more resources, if you like, okay, I would encourage you to follow us on social media, to follow our website. We're going to be publishing some blogs and some more insights into data over the coming months, as this is becoming quite a priority within our organizations. So, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your engagement so far. Are there any questions, perhaps? I'm going to stay online for a moment. Oh, there are some really interesting questions. And hi, Gregor from Canada. So one of the questions is, how can I remove bias from my data? Okay, that's Gregor asking. Well, that's a great question. Bias is inherent to us human beings, I would say. That's not something that it's not something that we can fully remove, I guess. Okay, so the only thing we can do about it is first of all is to make sure that we are aware of that bias, and we look out for the signs of that biased approach in our, first of all, again, designing our question, looking to our data, looking at our information delivery, and looking at that, and then making a decision eventually. So conscious awareness of our bias is probably the answer here. How do we remove bias from data itself? Again, that comes down to awareness of it existing. Okay, it's not always possible because if you think about tracing the data back to the source, well, the source could have been biased, but there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, so you can look at the trend within your data that shows that bias approach that was programmed into your data, and perhaps try to compare it with something more objective. So there's two things: being conscious, the principle being conscious of the bias and looking out for it in yourself and in the data that is presented to you. Okay, another question that I can see here is, how can I make sure the data I have is good? Again, there is a little bit of a chicken and egg question. Okay, so are you able to trace it back to the source? Okay. So if you are able to trace it back to the source, then you can perhaps evaluate, you can take time to evaluate how that data has been collected, what is the methodology, what was the methodology here, was that consistent, was that accurate, was the effort made to make sure that there are no errors. So it's not always possible, it's not always realistic, it's not always practical, okay? But I would say probably as much as reasonably practicable, try to source your, try to trace your data back to the source and ensure that the source, the first input was actually accurate, I would say. And also, try to find out a little bit, if you use AI, for instance, okay, try to find out a little bit about the algorithm that the AI tool uses, the methodology that it uses to then trace back sort of how it thinks and how does it then come to a certain conclusion to show you a certain, piece of information that you ask. So I would probably, it does sound a little bit like science fiction, I guess, but you could go back and speak to your IT providers to find out a little bit about how is it done to then ensure that there are some precautions taken to make sure that this is not biased, that this is accurate, and the quality of data produced is good. So yes, Grant, very, very, very good point. Quality in equates the good quality out. So indeed, the point of this short webinar was to show you how when you take enough effort to make sure that your in is right, then you get a really good decision out of it. But again, data is quality of data is one thing, but also our human approach to it, as in we are all flawed, we are all biased, we are all perhaps prejudiced, we are all perhaps short of time, and so on and so on. So there are two components to the data-driven decision-making: is data, but also human element of it. Okay, as humans, as being imperfect, drive that decision. Our awareness of our imperfections then will make sure that the data and the decision made based on it is going to be a good decision. So I think that's it. Are there any further questions, any further comments from anyone? If not, then this is it. So thank you very much again for being with us this afternoon. Please follow us on social media. Please follow our website for more insight and for more content. This session has been recorded and it's going to be shared with you guys, available anytime. For just now, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much and have a good day, everyone. Bye for now.